Hey, what's up, my friends? How's it going today? It's Carpo here for another random video about herbs. This is, I guess I made one last night, and generally I go through a variety of different subjects day to day when I talk in my videos, but I've been thinking the last couple days quite a bit about herbs, and today I was doing some research, and the word drug popped into my head, and I remembered a few conversations I've had in the past with people who associate anything that a person takes for a particular compound, say an herb, or could be, I guess you could consider even a vitamin a drug if you would, but when you look at the definition of the word drug, the most accurate definition of drug is anything that's taken or consumed to mitigate, prevent, or cure, or assist in any disease. And this is the exact reason why anyone who's not FDA approved has to put not intended to diagnose, prevent, or cure, or mitigate any disease. So those conversations I've had in the past with people who talk about living naturally and not having to take herbs or supplements, I wanted to start out by saying that to me that's complete hogwash. See, I consider herbs a vegetable more than I consider them a drug. When you take food, and when you eat any food, you're eating it to get nutrients. You may be taking it for the proteins or the carbohydrates. You need glucose. Your brain and your body need to be able to burn sugars, but we also need proteins so we can assemble disassemble into amino acids and then create our own proteins. And there are a lot of needs, so we eat different foods to get those different needs fulfilled. And we have become such a monoculture that everything that we grow now and everything that we eat, is so limited in variety. And it's especially tough for people who eat fast food, but especially even those who don't eat vegetables or not very many vegetables. Now I drink a smoothie. It's a full meal replacement smoothie daily to make sure that I get the basics, but I'm going by somebody else's chart about what the body needs. I'm just going and using that as a basis. Do I really believe that I need this many calories and this many of each nutrient? Of course not. They do the best they can to say, well, this is what a person needs to survive, so we'll just, use these numbers. It really depends on body type. The person, like in Asia, for example, they're more lactose intolerant. Europeans in some areas were able to start being able to digest cow's milk. And so it was carried on, and it became a genetic, anomaly, if you will, where some people can drink milk and some people can't. And developing intolerances to certain things, that can happen later in life, or you could be allergic to something early on and perhaps it goes away. The way that our bodies and minds work together is so complex and so misunderstood. And we're still in the baby steps of understanding how basic neurotransmitters, dopamine, serotonin, acetylcholine, play a role in sleep, eat, motivation, all these. There's a fine line between having energy and being tweaked out of your mind. There's a fine line between getting relaxed and knocking yourself the fuck out. Pardon my language, but even alcohol, in its essence, is an amazing medicine, something I didn't realize until recent years. Like about 2 years ago was the first time I realized that alcohol can be used medicinally. And this is because of the image that's been oppressed on it by society. Even marijuana is considered a drug. And that's a hard one to break because I grew up being told it's a drug. It's a drug. Of course, it's a plant. But the way it affects your mind makes people call it a drug. The thing is that the definition of drug, it's a secondary definition of anything that might alter your mind. The drug doesn't have to give you a mental effect, but it's all in how we use the word. But a couple of years ago I realized you can drink alcohol, I can drink alcohol, and have 1 or 2 beers and feel wonderful, and it gets me motivated to maybe dance at a show or concert, relaxes me a little bit. Or just having one drink a couple hours before dinner actually gets my appetite up, because I'm generally not as hungry. I don't have a very strong appetite. And actually, I was researching today about ashwagandha, and it was saying that ashwagandha does something very similar. And that's Indian ginseng, and people take it for an all-around feeling of well-being, but it seems to increase appetite. And there are certain, our guts produce serotonin and dopamine just like our minds do. Our cells, we have a whole a whole lot of different bacteria going on. Of course, we do have as many bacteria, if not more, in our body than our own cells, and that we work synergistically with them. We allow them to live in our gut. They help us digest our food. They help us move particles around. They help cells, retrieve nutrients, break things down, and build things up. And it's like teamwork going on in your body. Knowing which herbs, which foods, which drugs are useful is very difficult. There are people who want to be able to diagnose everyone and say, this is the diet for everybody. It's preposterous. And an interesting thing, reading this book earlier, this one I was mentioning yesterday, is the Encyclopedia of Psychoactive Plants. And there was one particular plant in there I was reading about where it was saying some people have an effect off of it, and others seem to get nothing off of it. And they were comparing it very similarly to, say, cannabis, how sometimes the first time a person smokes it, they might not get anything from it. And that's what happened to me years ago. But it's hard to know if maybe you just had crappy weed. Well, canna, or Scledium tortuosum, is another plant, and that was used by the Hottentot tribe in Africa. And they would mix it with cannabis. And we're not sure if the name canna, was derived from that source, or cannabis. They're not the same plant, but they were consumed together. And it would enhance the effects and relax a person. But the thing is, the first time I tried canna, and this has been reported by a lot of people, they seemed to get nothing off of it. And then a few times after they tried it, like the second or third time, all of a sudden they realized the effects. It seems that the body has to be primed for some substances to work. So that's why people may just take something one time and say, didn't do anything for me. And perhaps your body needs to... Perhaps it's similar to having a vaccine where you're introducing a small amount to the body, and it does its work to recognize and record in its cellular structure, this interaction between this virus or whatnot and the cell. So in the future it can recognize that, and maybe it does something similar with herbs, we just don't know. But there is so much to learn, and really the root of this video is to say that there is no simple answer to any of these questions about what we need. We have to experiment on our own to see if it works, and we can't get caught up on society's version of what a drug is. If we were to start all over today, remember, we are living in the programming we've grown up with. And if we were to stop today and say, how would I go about life to really understand these things? Going back to tribal times and the stories they have about certain plants, all the way down to, well, this particular plant should be harvested in the morning rather than at night because the effects are greater. Some of these people had thousands of years in their tribes to document these over and over and over, these interactions. And they say, why doesn't it work this time of day? And it does work this time of day. And so there's many subtle cues and hints which are in a book like this, which I could go on and on about all the details, but even with reading this whole book, I still will only have a small grasp on the bigger picture of what's going on. And I have several different ways to understand, the plant world, if you will. Make sure it's still going. So over here I'll start off with, the basics. Of course, if you're into cannabis, well, this is one of the books I bought years ago. Marijuana Horticulture. I'll be out in a minute. I'm making a video right now. I'll be right out. Those kids. He's reminding me it's time to pick up my other son. So, indoor marijuana horticulture, beyond that, there's so much to learn about cannabis, and I use that as an example to show that there are so many different plants out there to learn about that you can have books and books on one herb, and we're still just learning to understand this one particular herb and all the components in it. It's just, amazing. Then you've got older books like the Mushroom Guide, the mushroom books, and I have several different books about things like, fungi, mushrooms, and they're still not understood. I mean, Paul Stamets is I consider the foremost authority on medicinal mushrooms. and probably psychedelic as well. Terence McKenna was a big mushroom fan, but he wasn't so into the medicinal aspects, but more of the psychedelics. But all the different psychedelic mushrooms have different components into them. You know, there's not just psilocybin. Psilocybin metabolizes into psilocin in the body, but there's also baeocystin, which is higher in certain strains than others. But anyway, I won't get too technical on this. But having even books like this, like Trees, Shrubs, and Flowers in your area, this is the Washington one, it's great for if you're out and about, because you can find amazing wild ginger, you know, wild ginseng growing out in the woods here, you know, where I live. But I also have books like this, the very simple ones, Herbs and Spices and Herbs A to Z. This doesn't cover anything. It's got really recipes and the basics about herbs. So what I'm getting at is you need a whole variety of different reading. And then after that, you can get into the detailed stuff like the Ayurvedic home remedies. And this is great. Ayurvedic medicine is traditional Indian medicine. Not Indian Native American, but from India. Mucuna and ashwagandha are considered, I believe, Ayurvedic. But I'm not sure if... I'd have to look back into that on the mucuna, because I thought that was a South American plant. But it tells you all the different, the Pitta, the Kapha. There's 3 different body types. They're doshas, they call them. But it tells you all the different foods for different body types. And the last 3 books that I wanted to get into, this wasn't really about books, but rather about how to approach this subject of herbs, drugs, and food. Because like I said, I consider herbs vegetables before I consider them drugs. These 3 books right here, Pharmacodynamics, Pharmacognosis, and Pharmacopoeia, these are all by Dale Pendle. So, in a nutshell, this one is Stimulating Plants, Potions, and Herbcraft, Excitantia, and Empathogenica. This one is Power Plants, Poisons, and Herbcraft. And this one is Plant Teachers and the Poison Path. And these 3 books are just phenomenal. They've divided all the different substances into a little chart, and I couldn't even begin to explain this book. It basically is very, very poetic in the way that it handles drugs, but what people would call drugs. But I guess if a drug is something that's going to help the body and and to help to cure or mitigate a disease, then I guess that would be the perfect thing to have, right? Is things that actually change your mindset and help you to see things more clearly, which would allow your body to relax, because the body-mind connection is so tight, so important. You can see something that can just put you in a mind funk because it's so, whether it be disgusting or exciting. The way that our bodies react to our minds is the same way that our minds react to our bodies when we're feeling ill. So these 3 books, even with all this crap and all the other, vast amounts of information that I've downloaded and researched over the years, I feel like I'm just barely skimming the surface. I have to still go back and look at even the herbs I know well, like cannabis. I mean, I wrote a report on cannabis. My senior paper that I wrote was about cannabis medicinal benefits, and that was in the 90s. And I didn't even use references because I was so into cannabis and there was so little information to really put down that were facts that I just wrote it, from what I knew on my head. And I think I got a B on it. But I guess if I were to leave with a message here, since I have to go pick up my son now, it's 3:45. Don't let yourself be trapped by thinking that you're taking something that's harming you if it's actually helping you. And I guess the perfect example I could give would be Kratom. If you had just heard about Kratom and you started taking it, and didn't know anything about the possibility that, yes, it has addictive qualities, so does coffee, so does cigarettes. We have to be cautious about what we take and see if the benefits outweigh the risks. So if you're going to feel like crap a few days after you stop taking something, if you've been taking it for 2 years and you have to go through a withdrawal period for a few days, perhaps that 2 years was kind of worth it if it could help you overcome pain and anxiety. In other words, we're addicted to a lot of things, but doesn't mean that it has to trap us or we have to feel trapped. If kratom wasn't associated with opiates the way it has been, it wouldn't even be an issue. But since it was all over the news, since people have talked about the dangers, and there's just that what if in the air, then it makes people cautious. But nobody's saying that about the other herbs because they're not as well known. And as soon as something becomes popular, instantly there are suspicions about it and whatnot. So anyway, that's my herb video for the day. Darn it, I have to cut it short and go now. So I'll talk to y'all later and have a wonderful day. Peace.